Hey Reddit, what's the strangest coincidence you've ever personally experienced? My old work ran a secret Santa once the week before Christmas. It was a $10 limit and the person I was buying for I didn't know very well. I left my buying to the last minute because I just didn't know what to get her. So I was in town and walking past some shops when lo and behold, I see an old copy of Oliver Twist in the window of the second-hand bookstore. It just called to me. So I went in and picked it up. I checked the first page for the cost and guess what? $10. Perfect. So come the day of the secret Santa, we were all opening our gifts. Some 150 people. Out of the corner of my eye I see some people crowding around a woman who is crying. I keep listening and people are calling out for the person who was a Santa. I go over and reveal that it was me. The lady I had bought for was crying and hugged me. She said 10 years ago her house burned down along with all her possessions. The book that I bought her was her favorite and also the exact same edition, so had the exact same cover she remembered. Because it was a second-hand book it was even weathered in the same places she remembered. So it was as if I'd grabbed the book off her shelf before the fire and delivered it to her 10 years later. Here in my little town in northwest England there's a good kebab shop from which the lads and I have ordered for years. We've been in there after countless nights out and had them deliver to our doors. So we know the guys who work there pretty well. They're mostly Turkish. Once a few of us got together for a short break in Turkey. Having got off the plane, we waited in the car park outside for another pal who'd been on a different flight. As we stood, soaking in the ambience of a new country, none other than the tall guy from our local kebab shop walked across the road right in front of us. 2,000 miles from home. That was weird. I used to get 2 buses home from work. I got off the first one having left my phone and keys on the front seat of the bus without realizing. Got on the second bus, went to my favorite front seat and my possessions that I didn't know were missing were waiting for me. The bus had changed driver and route. Still freaks my nut out to this day. Phone, wallet, keys. I was in St. Augustine on vacation. On the way there I just happened to think about this girl I knew back in college in Orlando. Just sorta wondered what she was up to and the like. Sure as shit I ran into her in a bar there the first night. She was there celebrating graduating from PA school. Similar thing happened to me. I dated this guy Steven when I was in my late 20s and we lived together for a year and then we broke up. And I was devastated. It had been about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years since I'd seen him when I was walking in Santa Monica with my best friend and I said to her, you know what's weird? Steven has so many friends in common and I have never seen him in this whole time since we broke up. 5 minutes after that we walked across the street and walked into a restaurant and who is sitting there but Steven was sitting in a restaurant about 200 miles from where I live telling my mother, who was visiting from a different country, about a trip I had to another country about 6,000 miles away with a work colleague. And the lady at the table next to us leans over and says, I think you're talking about my son. Turns out I was sitting next to my colleague's parents while showing my mum pictures of our trip. In grade 10 English class, the teacher didn't have anything planned for us to do, and it was close to the end of the year I guess. So she goes to the big cupo board in the corner and pulls out a stack of copies. It's examples of a successful essay written during a final exam. So we can learn what a good one looks like, and how to build a narrative, etc. The topic of these was what was the most pivotal moment of your life. There's 3 examples, ranging in proficiency. We read through the first 2. And I volunteer to read the last one aloud. I start reading. And I stop. The essay was about me. My big sister had gotten a really good mark 6 years earlier on her final exam essay which she wrote about the day I was born. I got pretty emotional about that one. I like the idea that you just get all emotional and stuff while reading and everyone thought that it was like the best story ever. Like wow, we need to do something like that. But that's awesome. When I was born my mother told me my brother slapped me when he first saw me. That always gave me the edge on he started it, so when he refers to something like a week ago, I can be like yeah well, when I was first born you hit me. My wife and I were in Tucson visiting my mother who just moved there. My wife decided she wanted tamale, We drove around for 2 hours stopping in restaurants looking for tamales. Couldn't find one. Went back to my mother's apartment. Literally 2 minutes later somebody knocked on the door of my mother's apartment asking us if anyone wanted to buy any tamales. One year I got a roommate through Craigslist. The guy was weird for sure, but good natured and paid rent. Anyway, after about 2 months of living with him, my cousin comes over to hang. I introduce the two and my cousin in the most chill voice ever said, "Nah man, we know each other." Turns out they were college roommates 5 years earlier in another state. Oh my god, they were roommates. Not me, but a pretty interesting story in my family. Two of my great grandfathers got imprisoned in the same jail and served time together. My great grandfather on my mother's side was an architect and even drew my other great grandfather's house. Did their children know each other at the time? Or were they just two dudes in prison? Just two dudes in prison. My parents got together over 30 years after this. I think they found out this when my grandparents met each other. This is also kind of like a dark spot on both families' history and my grandparents don't like to talk about it. I moved from my small hometown halfway across the country to a small city where I knew absolutely no one. At the first party I went to in the new town, I started chatting with a guy. Turns out he had also just left my small hometown. I met a Canadian guy while on holiday in South America and we ended up going sightseeing together. At the end of the day a person behind us tapped him on the shoulder and asked if the scar behind his ear was from cancer surgery. They got talking. Turns out they were from the same small town in Canada, had the same type of brain cancer, and had been operated on by the same surgeon. Something's up with that town. No, nothing's up with it. It's just a coincidence that the town just happens to be Cancerville, Manitoba. Had a kidney transplant last year. Nurse makes a comment about it having my name on it. He elaborated to say that the donor has the same surname as me. Plot twist, donor was a parent/sibling. Or he lived in a country where about 10 surnames make up 90% of the population. An officer from a different PD was showing me a picture of a guy they wanted to arrest in a different part of town. As I looked up from the computer, I see dipshit riding by on a bike, literally 5 feet away from the squad car. I have an uncommon last name and a not a common first name. I was in the hospital for a surgery and the person in the next room was there for the same surgery. Come to find out that we were second cousins and never knew that the other existed. He had the same name as me and his wife had the same name as my wife. The pastor of church where I was musician informed me that a wedding couple would be coming to see me after Sunday services to discuss music for their forthcoming ceremony. It turned out to be a girl I dated in high school that I hadn't seen or heard from since graduation and her fiance. She remembered my organ playing from back then and already knew what pieces she wanted. I didn't even have to demonstrate organ playing. I've had several small world experiences, but the biggest was talking to a girl after my first university class and discovering through the course of a 2-hour-long conversation that our grandmothers had been each other's maid of honor and my aunt and her mom were best friends since childhood. Back in the early/mid 90s the phone system changed and you no longer needed to dial the area code for a long distance in-state call. We are a small state with only one area code. One morning I woke up to the phone ringing, and when I picked up I recognized the voice on the other end as belonging to my old boss from a few years ago. She had an unmistakable voice. We had a nice conversation for a bit before she realized she had dialed the wrong number. I lived in a different town in a different part of the state, but the number must have been off by only one digit from the one she tried to call. To add to the coincidence, I had overslept and would have been late for work if she hadn't called me and woken me up. Both of my grandfathers were named William and both grandmothers were named Joyce. There are at least 2 ways that could happen, and only involves a wild coincidence. Started dating this girl a few weeks ago. We get to talking about where we live, etc. She lives in not only the same building, but exact same apartment I lived in 2 years ago. It was so ducking bizarre walking into my old apartment that I never thought I would see again. What are the odds? Oh man. My now husband and I had the same deal. We, roommate and I, were the tenants that moved into his apartment right after him. We even came to look at it while he was still living there but not home. I had no idea I was looking at the furniture of someone I'd eventually marry. The first we hung out he came over and told me. I couldn't believe it. The person who sits next to me at work copies everything I do, except she has no way of knowing. I wear a blue sweater. She wears a blue sweater. I bring leftover spaghetti. She brings leftover spaghetti. It is so weird I almost hate her. Are you sure you don't sit by a mirror? Op is a dog. When I was 18, I lived in a town a very long ways away from where I ended up moving. I struck up a friendship with this guy from work in that town. We play Halo, watch movies, ECT, and he was awesome. I ended up moving suddenly due to a family emergency and never got his contact information. I didn't even remember his name a decade later, but I thought of him often as he was an awesome guy through all the years. 11 years later, I'm working at my job, carpooling with someone from my training class, and one night he asks if I mind his roommate being in the car as he was going to take the car after we got off at work and use it for the night. He introduces us. I turn around, and in the backseat is the guy from the town a very long ways away. We reconnected immediately, and now live together. He's my best friend, for sure, and the godfather to my children. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.